Since I make lots of videos about my experience studying in Switzerland, and for those of you who want to come here, I have a lot of people in the comment section asking me, how do I proceed without an agency? How can I follow through the visa steps? Well, for one thing, you don't really need an agency. Well, at least in my experience, I didn't go through an agency. I was lucky enough to have a person who was familiar with the visa requirements and the visa process, so that's who has helped me. One thing that stops a lot of people from actually looking at universities abroad or going through the process of studying abroad is the fact that the visa process can be very, very complicated. It can be very overwhelming and stressful. I have went through it myself, and I have seen other people go through it. I've seen other people give up on studying abroad because of the visa process, and I don't want that to be the case for you. If you're someone who gets overwhelmed and stressed out very easily, don't worry, you're not alone. I've been in the same shoes, and that's why I'm making this video, so that you can have at least some sort of free guide that guides you through the whole visa application process. Because even though it is still overwhelming and stressful, at least you know the next steps and what to do, and if you are actually doing it right. Now, I'm not an agency, I'm not working at an embassy or a university, but I will do my best to help you because I am familiar with how to apply for the visa. Everyone deserves quality education, and Switzerland does provide very high quality education. But one thing that I should tell you before you start your visa application or before you enroll to a university, if you are expecting to get a job after completing your bachelor's degree, if you're expecting to get a job in Switzerland or in the EU, please do not proceed with the application process. Let me tell you why. I've had so many of my friends who came from India graduate here in Switzerland with a bachelor's degree just to end up going back to their home countries. So they all went back to their home countries. As far as I know, they are employed back home, but they weren't able to find anything here in Switzerland or in the EU. So if you are doing a bachelor's degree with the intention of getting a job, forget it. If you're coming to Switzerland, you have to think about doing a master's degree or a PhD. Or if you really want a job after a bachelor's, I would highly recommend you to look into other EU countries. To be honest, I don't know what it's like there, like for example in Germany, but I do know that the chances of getting a job after you graduate, especially if you know the German language, are much higher than whatever it is in Switzerland. Before you apply for a Swiss visa, you need to be sure to already have an enrollment letter from a university. Now, let's get started. How do I get enrolled to a university? First things first, you Google the university that you want to go to. I've had other videos that I talk about universities. I will link it somewhere here. And basically you can choose a university according to what it is that you want to study. Make sure you choose a bachelor's that you want to do and not just because other people have done it. I have personally completed my bachelor's in IT management. I'm still doing a master's degree. That's why I'm here in Switzerland. I'm not yet working full-time. I have graduated with a bachelor's degree in HSLU. So the admission team at that university has helped me through the visa process, but also another person who was familiar with the process. Now, if you want to get enrolled to your particular university, again, find the course that you are interested in that university, and then contact the admissions people. If you're an international student, it's usually done by the international admissions team. So that's what you'd like to Google. So for example, if you want to study in, let's say an example other than HSLU would be UZH. So you would Google UZH international admissions. So you'd find a contact details of an admissions person in the international office of that university, and you send them an email that you'd like to be enrolled in a particular course. Sometimes there might be online portals where you have to log in and submit your documents. There is also something called the student mobility tool, at least I think for my university we had that, but I'm not sure, I don't remember completely. So there might either be portals or you might have to contact the admissions directly. Now, how it works for an enrollment in university, I don't remember having to go through exams, but I do remember having to go through, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of interviews, where the interviews weren't only me, but also with my parents to basically assess, I guess, the living conditions and what are the sponsorship programs like. By sponsorship, I mean when your family sponsors you as a student. So you might have to go through an interview process. I guess the the enrollment depends on the university and what kind of degree it is that you want to do. So maybe in some degrees you'll have to do an examination, but I didn't have to go through that. Once you have gone through the rounds of interviews, you should get an acceptance or a rejection. Hopefully in your case it will be an acceptance if that's what you want. And once you get accepted to a university, it means you'll have a letter of enrollment. And after you get this enrollment letter, you should receive the step-by-step visa process requirements or how to apply for a visa. And this usually comes in the format of a checklist. And as much as the university does try to help you by having a checklist and telling you which documents and which steps are needed, university is not really much help, not too much. So you'll have to go through applying for the visa yourself. You'll have to contact the embassy that is in your location, in your country. And then you'll also have to contact the not the embassy, but the consulate of the canton that you want to live in. For the admissions, for the required documents, you should usually find that in the checklist as I mentioned. But if you don't find it, you can just simply Google guidelines for students with visa requirements in Switzerland, and you should see all of the requirements that are actually needed from you, all the documents that are actually needed from you. So first, let's talk about the National D Visa form. The National D Visa form, I will not show it here on the screen because I don't know what are the legal implications of that. I don't know if I can actually show it, but you can simply Google that and you'll find the form, and it should be straightforward. You just fill in all of the details that are asked from you. And then we have the other documents, which are your passport. It needs to be your passport photo. Confirmation of admission to the university is the enrollment letter that you get from your university of acceptance. And then you'll need a CV. Now, a CV is usually required by the university itself while you're enrolling, so you can just send them the same exact CV. Then you'll also need your high school diplomas. Now, in my case, I've already had work experience before I applied to study here in Switzerland, and that's something that you will need. You'll need at least 1 year of professional work experience in the field that you're applying to enroll for. I don't know if that's the case for all universities and all degrees, but in my case, for international IT management, I needed the work experience. And then you'll need a motivation letter. This can be the same one that you sent to your university during the enrollment. And in the motivation letter, it is suggested that you have your future plans in it as well. And speaking of future plans, you'll also need a written pledge to exit Switzerland. Now, this was a little confusing for me when I was applying for my visa, so let me explain it to you in a little more detail. So the written pledge to exit Switzerland is basically proving that you have all of the financial means to stay in Switzerland. That's something that you'll prove with your bank statement, but also something that says that you're not going to stay in Switzerland after you complete your degree. Now, I know this might seem a little weird because if you have plans to stay in Switzerland, if you plan to continue your master's or your PhD, don't worry, this written pledge is not so that they can use it against you, I'm guessing. But even though I have written a written pledge to exit Switzerland, I still wanted to do my master's degree here afterwards, so I was able to do that. This written pledge is a formality for you to basically make sure that you have all of your living expenses covered, so that you can pay off your insurance, and so that you're not a trouble to the nation, basically. So a written pledge should say something like that you're coming to Switzerland for a study purpose and that you will leave Switzerland after you have completed your studies, or if you're planning to do your master's, or if you're planning to seek a job in Switzerland. So that should all be in your written pledge. It doesn't have to be a whole one-pager. It can be just a few paragraphs. At least in my case, that was just a few paragraphs, and that was sufficient. And again, when I applied for a master's degree, even though I applied from Switzerland, I still had to sign a written pledge and send it to them. Now, all of these signatures, as far as I know, cannot be digital. It has to be all printed, and you have to sign it yourself, scan it, and then send it to them. And for the written pledge, they actually have a sample letter, I think. So if I do find that sample letter, I'll put it somewhere here. So the next thing on the list would be proof of sufficient financial means. This is where you have to prove that you have a minimum of 21,000 Swiss francs in your account under your name. Now, this cannot be in a bank account that's under your parents' name or under your family's name. It has to be specifically your name. And this has to be not just in any bank account, it has to be specifically in a FINMA approved bank account. Now, I don't personally know how this works or how to explain it to you in detail, but you can simply Google it. FINMA list of authorized banks and securities dealers. If I find it, I will put it somewhere here so that I can show you. If not, I will link it in the description of this video. And this 21,000 Swiss francs is something that you have to prove every year. And this is so that the government knows that you have sufficient financial means in Switzerland. Also, living in Switzerland is not cheap, so you will need a lot of money for the living expenses here. Even though education is quite affordable, it's still quite expensive to live in Switzerland. Of course, you won't really need all of the 21,000 Swiss francs depending on your lifestyle, but you can definitely live on less. This 21,000, again, you'll have to prove every single year, because every year you renew your permit. Your permit only lasts a year. So yes, I'm repeating myself. Every single year you'll have to prove this 21,000 Swiss francs in a FINMA bank. Now this FINMA bank, I'm not sure if all of the countries have it. I don't think so, to be honest, because I remember it was pretty difficult for some people abroad to have a FINMA bank account. But if you do have one, this is where you need to open an account. If you don't have a FINMA bank in your country, it might be a bit of a problem, because a lot of your visa process really depends on your proof of financial means. This proof of financial means is basically going to make it or break it for you. I don't know if that's the term to use here, but if you don't provide sufficient proof of sufficient financial means, your visa can be rejected. There's a very high chance of it being rejected if you don't have it in a FINMA bank. So please make sure that you do have it in a FINMA bank. And if you don't, inform your university up front, ask them what to do. I don't know if they can be much help, but just be careful with this bank account FINMA thing. And lastly, let's talk about the costs of applying for a visa to Switzerland. It shouldn't be too much. It shouldn't be like bank breaking for you to apply for a visa, because usually for the consulate of Switzerland, I think you'll pay around 50 to 100 Swiss francs. I think it says so in the website right here, if I could show you. And it will also have to depend on where you are applying the visa from, like which consulate you're using, which embassy. So the cost will largely depend on that. And of course, you have the admission fee when you get enrolled to a university. And yeah, I think I have mentioned all the costs. Now, speaking of embassies in your country, if you don't have one particularly in your country, you'll have to find one that's closest to your country and then apply from there. It's very important to go in person, because this is where you'll have to submit your passport and all of the documents, and all of these documents have to be printed out. I would highly recommend you, before you start your visa application process, that you have a checklist of all the documents, so that as you go, as you collect all of your documents, you can just tick them off one by one. Also, keep all of the digital versions of your documents. Open a Google document or whatever it is that you use, and have all of your digital files in one place. I would also recommend you that you send all of these files to your university first to approve whether these are the right files, and then send them to the consulate and to the embassy. So we've come to the end of this video. I hope that I have covered all of the necessary parts of applying for a visa as an international student. And if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. Now remember, again, I'm not an agency, I'm not working for a university. I simply want to help you make your life easier while you're applying for a student visa. It can be a very stressful and complicated process, but I wish you good luck. If you want to see any of my other videos on the topic of studying in Switzerland, click somewhere here or here. The videos will probably pop up here. And I hope to see you in those videos.